Winning the con, the Toma Kanita Pagas, got the Squamson. Good evening, family, friends. How you doing? Two Hawks, Federation of Aboriginal Nations of the Americas. Hope that this communication is finding you all well and blessed this lovely spring moving into summer evening. I just wanted to take a moment because there's been a lot of activity on the FANA scene over the past couple of weeks, just to formally update everyone on what's been going on. And just to share a few words in terms of encouragement and validation for the work that FANA has been doing and the strategy that the member nations have suggested to those out there who may be interested in following suit. So first, let's start with some of the things that have happened. So on April 18th, at the 50th Annual International Indigenous Peoples Cultural Conference hosted by the Providence Cultural Equity Initiative, taking place at Rhode Island University's Baypoint Conference Center in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, the member nations of the Federation of Aboriginal Nations of the Americas did a number of things. First, they signed treaties of commerce and trade and law and comity amongst themselves. Now, this was building upon the Treaty of Montauk that the member nations formed amongst themselves in 2019. And that was a treaty of peace and friendship, health, and wellness. And that's because the FANA member nations believe that if you can't start off with peace amongst each other, how can you get to any of the other elements? So we've already done that in 2019, and that was capacity that we were moving in since then. We also formalized the Constitution for the member nations of FANA at that time as well. So moving on to the 18th, what we then did was formalize the next step was, like I said, forming a treaty of commerce and trade amongst the member nations, because we know commerce is key, right? It's key to anything. When you're talking livelihood, when you're talking defense of a nation, you have to be able to engage in commerce. And a lot of times commerce comes through trading with other nations. So we formalized that amongst ourselves. And then the law and comity, the law is basically asserting that we have our own laws, customary and traditional, and under our Constitution that we follow. Each member nation follows, and the comity means that we acknowledge the lawfulness of each other's constitutional, traditional, and customary laws as well. And that we will, respect them because we expect our own to be respected. So those are very key. And then what we did, because what we've come to realize is that a key issue that all nations have been facing is that even when you assert your rights, even when you argue your jurisdiction, even when you do all of that, what venue do you have to really address any of the issues that may pop up? We don't. It's just these US and state court systems that are around. So they're going to continue to move forward with it because there's no space for us to handle our matters. So in accordance with, I believe it's Article 9 of the Constitution of the Federation of Aboriginal Nations of the Americas, the FANA Principal Chiefs Council decided and approved amending the Constitution to formalize the FANA intertribal court system, which is a really interesting concept. Basically, it kicks into play whenever there's issues that apply between nations. So a tribal citizen between another tribal citizen of FANA member nation, businesses, whatever the case may be. But it doesn't have any jurisdiction over the individual nations themselves. Only kicks in when they're engaged with each other, which is cool because it retains sovereignty in each nation. And then it provides an unbiased space for conflicts between the nations to be addressed in a manner that everyone can be respecting of. So that was fantastic. And once again, it provided that space for us to now address our own matters. But even more key to that is that we were able to appoint a chief justice to it. For our particular system, we call it our first Taupau. A Taupau is a wise man. So that's the equivalent of our judge. So our first Taupau and a Lord Chief Justice, that's the terminology they use over in the good old UK. But His Excellency Judge Robert Orville Thomas, who is a very well-renowned and accomplished international human rights lawyer. He actually gave remarks at the International Indigenous Peoples Cultural Conference. I'll put the link to the full conference down below, as well as the links to His Excellency as well, so you can check that out. And it's really great because if you know the law and understand what the role of the judge is, the judge doesn't create the law. The judge's position is just to interpret the laws as they've been written by your counsel, by the Principal Chief's Counsel, based upon the intent of the laws as they were written. So you bring in unbiased individuals to take a look at laws, statutes, codes that the council has come up with. If there's a conflict related to them, and you trust that person to have integrity and respect and honor, and to be capable of adjudicating or making a decision on how that law should be interpreted, that will affect how your nation moves forward. So very honored to have His Excellency in that particular position and willing to work with us. He said the reason he was working with us is because he knew who we were and he supported our cause, and it was right. So we just want to extend many thanks to Lord Robert Orville for his great honor in serving in that capacity with our intertribal court system. So those are the first 4 things that the FANA Member Nations did amongst themselves on the 18th. The Treaty of Commerce and Trade, the Treaty of Law and Comity, the amendment to the Constitution, and the appointment of the Chief Judge. What we shared recently within the past couple of days is that we also formalized the Treaty of Peace with the Kinakwii Sovereign Confederacy up in the Canadian regions. And this is really key, right? Because right now, most of the lands that we are dealing with have been specifically within the boundaries, quote unquote, boundaries of the US. That's how they like to argue and say that they are. We know what they are, but that's how they like to see them. Well, they're in the boundaries of the US. But now that we've extended this treaty relationship with the Kinakwii, our jurisdiction transverses, is that the word I want? I don't know. It goes beyond those boundaries that the US and Canada have established amongst themselves, because we're not under their jurisdiction. So it's going to be really interesting moving forward as we exercise these rights, because there's really no legal standing, no lawful standing to say that what we're doing isn't correct. So that's going to be really interesting. But the Kinakwii are great. They were able to get through the legal system, a ruling of default on the Pope and the Queen in terms of the claims they made against their lands and how they were theirs. So we're really excited to be in treaty with them. And of course, treaty comes along with confidentiality agreements and sharing information. But that, what strategies each of us have been utilizing to move us forward, this is really what's key and why these treaties are so important. Now, that's the 5th thing that was done. What was done a couple of days ago, and this is really key, is we then took and made a constructive and public notice of everything that took place, not only highlighting what happened, but also who was there to see it. And that's so key. We had dignitaries there from the Sovereign Kingdom of Atui, which you would now know as Hawaii and the Pacific Islands. We had the Kinakwii Confederacy on. We had an international delegation that was on of academic scholars and business professionals, and then and medical professionals as well. And then we also had our Chief Justice there witnessing and taking the oath as well. Very interesting coming in before everything was going on. People getting stopped at the border, told that their UN credentials weren't able to be used right now because the UN wasn't in session. Really, really interesting space that was going on. But it showed the impact of what they knew we were about to do and what we did. So all of that went on. We took all of that, we made a constructive public notice and filed it on the County Registry of Deeds here in Providence, Rhode Island. Now, we do this because, and you can see it on the Facebook page, you can see it on the social media, that puts the filing number on the side, which makes that a commercial document that we can now bring up in terms of our arguments from a legal perspective. So all of the things that you see us doing tie into the fact that all jurisdiction over Indian tribes under US law is interpreted through the Commerce Clause. So we want to make sure that we're documenting and making our own statements in a commercial manner so that we can speak the same language that they're speaking. And all of this creates our record. of who we are and what we have the right to do. In our constructive public notice, we give a 30-day opportunity for anyone to rebut, but we highly doubt that anyone's gonna wanna go on record trying to say what we've done is invalid, because it is. And no one wants to get caught up in a legal situation like that, making false claims. So very, very exciting stuff over these past couple of weeks. And we're just excited here at FANA on what next steps are going to be now. Having shared that, a number of individuals have reached out, and I'm saying individuals because that's primarily what it's been. So I just want to reiterate, and so that people don't take any offense or get off put by responses that any of us may give at FANA. But in moving forward and growing in our understanding and application, we've come to understand that sovereigns, true sovereigns, cannot form sovereign relationships or treaties with non-sovereigns. Not only is it not a valid relationship, but it also will negate the sovereignty of the nation that forms that treaty. So from FANA Member Nations perspectives, we cannot generally reach out to the community to pull them in on what we're doing, because it would negate anything that we've done. So instead, as we've been saying, we're encouraging everyone, do your genealogy, find out who you are, get with your people, organize yourselves, articulate your claims, and reach out. And what I'm really hoping, and what we at FANA are really hoping, is that everything that everyone sees going on that FANA is doing is motivation to follow in our steps. I know that there's a lot of theories out there, a lot of arguments, different groups, especially on social media. Do this, do that, file this, file that. Let me be honest and frank with you. It does not matter how much you study. It doesn't matter how much documentation you pull up. Doesn't matter how much history you know. Doesn't matter what you look like. Doesn't matter what your skin tone is. Doesn't matter what your hair texture is. Doesn't matter where you was living at. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is if you are the people that have the right to make the claim. If you are by blood the people that have the right to make the claim. And we have to understand that this is the way most things are around most of the world. If you're not in a democracy or some sort of, newer Euro-colonial sort of concept, you're probably in some sort of monarchy or chiefdom that's going on, where it's by blood heritage, and that's the way things are. The Americans that came here didn't like how their monarch was conducting himself, so they wanted to create something new. But because the King of England was out of control and a lot of the European monarchs were out of control, doesn't mean the entire world's monarchs were out of control. Doesn't mean the entire world's nobility was out of control. It just means that the American experience was like that. So from our perspective and from the international perspective, it's all about who your bloodlines are. Who are you related to? What rights have you inherited? And are you in the capacity to exercise them? And if that's the answer is yes to that question, now comes the history. Now comes the documentation. Now comes the law. Now comes the skin tone, hair texture. Look if that applies to your specific experience for your specific tribal nation. But none of that matters if you are not the person who you are claiming to be. So this is why none of the other paradigms, in our opinion and in our experience, are going to work. Because there's no way to prove that people are those people. Prove that you're one of the ancient Israelites from thousands of years ago. Prove that you're one of the Moors that were, prove that. And then prove that claim that you're making on their behalf. Can't be done. But the tribal nations and the inherent sovereignty that they had when Europeans arrived here, and the bloodlines that continued from those people that they murdered and enslaved, and they're still around and they can be identified. And I guarantee you that this federal government and all these international powers know who we are. And I use the term we in terms of the nations of these lands are. They're just not saying anything because we don't know. So it all comes down to who you are, your bloodlines, who your family is, what rights you inherited. You can't get around it. You can't study around it. You can't form new groups around it. You can't do any of that because it's fact and it's history and it is what it is. And the only way that you're going to be able to move beyond it is to go back to the point where everything went wrong. So just wanted to share that general update. Very exciting stuff that's going on. Please do continue to check out the website, social media, and all that sort of stuff. Over the next couple of weeks, we will continue to post language from some of the other treaties that were formed. If you are a nation out there and you see what's going on with the FANA Member Nations and you're of the proper status, you are those people, reach out. We are open to it. This is what FANA was established for the originals to be able to get put back in their rightful place. And we're making a lot of progress. But the more nations that have that status, that are a part of this movement, the stronger the voice is, the more progress we can make. So to the sovereign nations that are out there, don't go the federal recognition route. Don't go any of that nonsense. No disrespect to any of our federally recognized families, but we see that ploy and that strategy for what it is. Go the fully sovereign route and take your place amongst the other nations who are of that same status as you are. Once again, to the individuals out there, there is no individual sovereignty. You are a U.S. citizen unless you have citizenship in some other tribal nation. If you don't, then you are considered a U.S. citizen if you have a state birth certificate. That's it. If you have a state birth certificate, you are a U.S. citizen. Point blank. There's no individual ability to do it unless you are that individual who has that blood right to make the claim. And then in that case, you should really be getting together with your families and the other related families to reestablish your nation. So just wanted to share that, www.fana.global. Check it out. Check us out on Instagram and on Facebook as well. All of the postings are there, press releases and all that. And like I said, it's looking like it's going to be some really interesting times. Just want to share these thoughts. We go ahead and do that on the 18th. I believe it was the 21st, maybe the week after that. The BIA relaxes its federal recognition standards in terms of putting land into trust. These aren't coincidences. These aren't coincidences. If you know what you're paying attention to and know what to look for. So much blessings to you all out there. Once again, to those sovereign nations, you know who you are. You've been getting your fight on. Reach out. Go right to the FANA website, the Join tab, fill out the application. We'll review it. If the information matches up, someone from FANA will be reaching out. For those individuals, continue the journey, continue the search, continue to find out who you are, and then continue to move forward. Don't get stuck in what happened to you. It happened to a lot of us. What are we doing about it? And if you're going to stay stuck on what happened to you, then you're going to be right where you're at today, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. But other nations will have moved on because there's a path. Lots of theories out there, lots of arguments. We're not trying to knock anyone. What we're saying is the path that we're laying out, the path that we're following, we can speak to as being effective. And remember, at FANA, we don't talk about the things we're trying to do or the things that we think. We talk about the things that we've accomplished and the things that we've proven to be true. And that's why we hope that when you listen to any of the things that we put up on these YouTube page or in other venues, that you put some stock in it because we respect you and your life and how valuable it is to not feed you things that we haven't confirmed ourselves. So once again, many blessings to you all. Hope that this recording finds you well, just general updates. And we will be in touch soon when we have something else to share. And once again, please keep an eye out on our social media and web pages. Should be some exciting stuff coming up in the future days, weeks, months, years, as we continue to chart an uncharted path. Wuni Nakan, Wuni Mosquito, Ka'akuni. Good night, good medicine, and peace be unto you all. Oh.